Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second video in our series, Everyday Reinvention, the Power of Coaching for Ministry Change. I'm Charity Starchenko. I'm the marketing manager at Vibrant Faith, and I'm here with Jim Ledoux, the director of coaching and coaching services. Today, we're going to talk about shaping culture in ministries and churches. So, Jim, to start out the discussion, I'm wondering how do we best define what church or ministry culture is?
I think in its simplest form, culture is really what we consistently say and what we consistently do, because that's what will shape every facet of our ministry. But in addition to that, it's also our culture is defined or shaped by our values. What are the things that we say are most important? They're defined by what we pay attention to and measure, as well as what we celebrate. They're defined by our traditions and our norms and our ongoing practices. I would even advocate and how those norms show up in our plans and our programs in that setting. So to be able to, we need to focus on what matters, and then how do we talk about that?
Yeah.
And sometimes our culture is shaped by what we say, and sometimes by what we neglect to say. So that's where words are really important. And we need to help people talk about what matters most and find tangible ways to do what matters most.
Yeah. And what are ways in the life of a congregation or a church where we can see ministry and church culture play out? Is it on the web? Is it inside of church bulletins? Where are the places we can look to evaluate our church culture?
Yeah. Actually, I think where I would start is actually invite congregations to paint a picture of what is the culture they want to create.
Yeah.
What would that actually look like? How would people experience it? And actually put that into a narrative form, that this would be the desired culture. And then with that picture in mind, then start evaluating. How does this image of our preferred future, our preferred culture, show up in our Facebook page, on our website, in our e-newsletter, in our social media sites? So obviously communication is a critical piece.
Yeah.
And then even begin to start thinking, how does it show up in our staff meetings, in our meetings with elected leaders? How does it show up in our worship experience? But it's a lot easier because really culture is about aligning with what we say matters most.
Yes.
And we need to find out where are we aligned and celebrate that aspect of culture and reinforce it. And then we need to note where we're out of alignment. What would we need to change in what we say and do that would actually more closely align with the preferred future, the culture that we're seeking to create.
Yeah.
So, and then I would lift up, I just think it's really important to start small. With communication, so often we send mixed messages. We value hospitality, but then someone comes and they don't experience it in person when we do that. And so when I say starting small, maybe we need to actually just model the culture we want for other people or to experience. With our staff first, and then maybe with our elected leaders, and then our ministry team leaders, so that you get this ongoing circle of people that are modeling the culture. Yeah. Because that's when people are seeing it modeled, that's how then they start following it as well. But the leaders have to lead in that capacity to help shape it.
Yeah, that is really great insight. That actually leads me to my next question. When we talk about impacting culture and culture change, is that something that we consider to be a top-down model where the leaders kind of vision and cast that vision for church culture, or is it more of a lateral community created culture?
Yeah. Well, and two questions I often ask members if I go where I'm working with a church, and I'll ask members, what caused you to join this church and what would cause you to leave? Because that usually gets at the emphasis of what are their core values? What would drive them, to either be part of this and invest in this community, and what would cause them to leave? So I think you kind of have to start with the core values. What's our purpose and what's our values? That it needs to be kind of crystal clear for everyone. And then the question is, I think where this bubbling up idea of where it comes from the larger community, I think they play a critical role, and especially where leaders can tap in and say, this is where we see so-and-so living out hospitality. Look at this person that's living in their calling and serving their neighbor in a unique way. So I think it's their stories, their examples of how they're living that out, how they're reinforcing the culture can be really powerful.
Yeah.
But leaders,
Yeah.
I think, ultimately kind of have to define based on listening from their community, listening to their congregation, listening to God. They kind of need to shape what the larger picture looks like.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then it really becomes a blending of both. What are we learning from our members, and how do we embed and infuse that into what we're doing? And how do we also provide enough structure that people can understand what this culture is ultimately looking like and how we might shape it? So I
Yeah.
think it really comes both ways. But I'll share with you one area where I've seen some really strong cultures that have been quite powerful, and they
Okay.
dissipate rather quickly.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
that's usually when there's been a change of leadership.
Mhm.
So in essence, you had a variety of leaders that have modeled this culture that they sought to create. And then you might have had new pastors, you have new elected leaders, and they
Mhm.
weren't onboarded in what was the culture. And in essence, then they started creating a different type of culture
Mhm.
without knowing what it was. So the culture has to be reinforced. And it's really critical that as leadership transitions take place, that we're orienting people about that culture, what
Yeah.
it is, how it shows up, and how they can reinforce it.
Yeah.
So know that that's an ongoing process of reorientation, reminding people, saying, this is what we say matters here, and
Yeah.
here's how it shows up.
Yeah, that's really great. My last question is, what are challenges to shaping and changing culture and or church ministry culture?
Actually, I think one of the biggest challenges we have is, as I mentioned, about painting that picture.
Hmm.
And churches spend a lot of time creating their mission, vision, values, and they announce it to the entire congregation. But just about every one of those churches will not be using that as a lens for when they create their next board meeting.
Yeah.
They're not thinking as they're shaping and planning their worship experience. They're not looking at that saying, how is this worship experience reinforcing it?
Hmm.
So I think the primary challenge is, how do we keep it front and center so that it actually shapes everything we say and do in that process? And then do we actually have a way of going back and just saying, are we living into this? What are we doing that's aligning? And what can we celebrate out of that? And what is really sending a mixed message? What do we need to stop doing as a result of this that's harming our culture? So
Yeah.
one, you have to have it front and center, consistently remind people, but you also need to have a chance and opportunity and systems that allow us to review it, to say, are we still living into it?
Hmm.
Or have we drifted from what we said we are about?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really great. This is a great conversation. I can talk about this sort of thing all day. So
Yeah.
if you are interested in learning more about coaching opportunities, you can connect with Jim at the bottom of this video, and you can also browse our website. You can learn more about us, more about our coaches, more about Jim himself. And our next video is actually going to be about the different types of coaching relationships and coaching in general. What is it like to engage in coaching and have a supportive coaching relationship in and outside of all different phases of ministry life? So thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.